And welcome to our Agricultural Innovation Board meeting. As a reminder, this meeting is being recorded as public record, and that participation in a recorded meeting will be deemed as consent to be recorded, including statements both written and oral. Public records, including this recording, can be requested at any time in accordance with the Vermont Public Records Act. So, welcome. Good to see everyone. We do have quite a few things that we're hoping to get through today, so I'm going to kick us off right away with introductions. So first, let me go through the members that I see online. Steve, you're the first one that comes up, so go ahead, Steve.
Steve Dwinell, Director, Public Health, Agricultural Resource Management Division for the agency.
Steve Schubart, I forgot we had two Steves. Go, Steve.
Steve Schubart, AIB board member, coming from the beef and meat side.
Thanks, Steve. Leon?
Leon Korth. I'm an organic dairy farmer in southern Vermont.
Thanks for joining us, Leon. Ryan?
Ryan Rebozo, Director of Conservation Science for the Vermont Center for Eco Studies.
Thanks, Ryan. Pam Wadman?
Hi, I'm Pam Wadman. I'm a human health risk assessor with the Vermont Department of Health.
Thanks. I'll go around the room here and then I'll do everyone else online. Go ahead, Pam Breyer.
Pam Breyer, agrochemical toxicologist with the Agency of Agriculture.
Stephanie Smith, Deputy Director within the Public Health and Agricultural Resource Management Division.
Jill Goss, Agricultural Input Specialist for the Feed, Seed, and Fertilizer Department.
Thanks, Jill. And I see Roy, we're just doing our introductions.
All righty, Roy Beckford, Associate Dean and Director of Extension at UVM.
Thanks for joining, Roy.
Thank you.
Okay, other people that I see online, Amanda Albers. Okay, how about Patty?
Hey folks, Patty Casey. I'm the Environmental Surveillance Program Director with the Agency of Agriculture.
Dylan?
Hi, I'm Dylan Davinoff, Agriculture Resource Management Specialist for Addison, Rutland, and Bennington counties.
Brooke?
Hey everybody, Brooke Decker, the pollinator health specialist with the agency in the farm division.
Mike Snow? It's okay. He's going to be on later, so he can introduce himself when he's on bigger spotlight. Ross Conrad?
Hi, everybody. Ross Conrad. I run a small beekeeping operation out of Middlebury, Vermont.
And Zach?
Zach Shikowski, also with the Farm Division, Agricultural Resource Management Specialist.
Thanks, and I'm Morgan Griffith, Agrochemical Program Manager with the Agency of Ag. And I think, is there anyone on that I missed? I see Mike's getting his audio and video up and running, so we'll hear from him later. So quickly, I goofed and I didn't send out the meeting minutes from our January meeting until very recently, so I apologize for that. But I didn't hear from anybody for any edits to those meetings. Are we okay with those meetings as I sent them out, the meeting minutes? You see nods. Great.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so our first chunk of information is a legislative update. So I'm first going to have Pam Breyer here in the room talk through what's been going on in the legislature concerning PFAS.
Okay, PFAS. So I feel really bad, everyone, because I've made you sit through some really long descriptions of what we have done about PFAS. If you remember, at the end of last year, the legislature directed Act 131, which required a report to go back to the legislature this past November. And you all have sat through a thorough description of that. And I apologize today because the legislature has done away with all of that, and it's all completely new. So what I'm about to tell you, where we are, is at the end of last year, they had an investigation into a consumer products ban that would have banned all consumer products containing PFAS. When it got to the legislature this January, there was a disagreement over the definition that we had proposed in our report to them and the one that they had really wanted to use. And the way that it shook out is that in order to preserve the definition of PFAS that the legislature was interested in preserving, meant that instead of banning all consumer products with PFAS in them, they have instead added 3 items to the already existing list of prohibited items with PFAS, but maintained the definition of a 1 fully fluorinated carbon definition. So they've added cleaning products, dental floss, and fluorinated containers to the list of items that would be prohibited if they contain PFAS. And so the existing ones are stain treatments, artificial turf, cookware, incontinency products, juvenile products, rugs, carpets, ski wax, and textiles. So this adds just a few new items onto that existing list, but it preserves the inertia under the 1 fully fluorinated carbon definition. The agency, our agency, is still on track for producing a report in January 2033 to provide a recommendation on how to address PFAS in food. And one of the interesting things that did come out of the discussions is they recognized that during the manufacturing process, water that manufacturers use can be contaminated with PFAS, and they didn't want manufacturers liable for contaminated water if there weren't other circumstances around that. So they allowed an exemption for use of water with PFAS, so small amounts of PFAS contamination in it. And so in the end, the Agency of Natural Resources is not being tasked with any additional regulatory burden with regulating all consumer products, but it just kind of stays where it was with the authority with the Attorney General's office. So that's the consumer products ban, and that's the one thing that we have been talking about over time. There were 3 other bills that have gone up this year, all having to do with residuals of some sort, septage, biosolids, and sewage, and being spread on farm fields. And all 3 of those have not been taken up by their respective. There's been no progress on those. But I guess the one thing is, in terms of progress, what I was just talking to you about with the consumer products ban is that it was voted out of the House Environment Committee with support of the House Human Services Committee. So it's now going on at the second half of its journey. That's it. That was longer than I said I was going to take. I apologize.
This is perfect. Does anyone have any questions for Pam? Great. So the second update from our legislature is going to be Zach. So go ahead, Zach.
Yeah, so just a few things I'm going to touch on, and the first will be the miscellaneous House Ag Bill. And Stephanie, please fill in anything I'm missing, but essentially that's looking to amend Title 6, Chapter 28, which deals with fertilizer, lime, as well as soil amendments. In short, the goal of this bill is to align with the Association of American Plant Food Control Officials, who passed or approved rather a model bill last year, and it's looking to do a couple things, but one of them is essentially rolling over terms, because there's a lot of different types of products with various terms, essentially rolling soil amendment, plant amendment, and plant biostimulant, which are referenced in various points throughout the chapter, into a single term, which would be a beneficial substance. So, instead of having registration of soil amendment, plant biostimulant, all these various things, you just can reference one single term, and that's a beneficial substance. And it's also looking to amend the plant biostimulant definition to conform with the AFCO definition, as well as adding the new definition of plant inoculant. If anyone has any questions, I'm going to do my best to answer those. Otherwise, I'm just going to briefly touch on a short form bill, and that's the previous one was H484. Next would be a short form bill, which is H326, following up on discussions in the legislature last year about the use of anticoagulant rodenticides. H326, generally short form bill looks to prohibit the use of both first and second generation anticoagulant rodenticides by any person, and they would also look to ban the sale thereof, including internet sales of those rodenticides in the state, and then also provides, in certain circumstances, exemptions for their use to the Department of Fish and Wildlife when no other pest control method would be effective. And lastly, kind of looking to restrict other legal rodenticides, such as bromethalin near wildlife refuges, state parks, and other ecologically sensitive areas. This has been briefly discussed in House Ag. Lastly, following up on last year's Act 182 that dealt with neonicotinoids, which I know the board has dealt extensively with, is H372, and that's looking to expand the prohibitions listed in that act of prohibitions on the use of neonicotinoid pesticides to nursery starts and potted plants. And would define nursery starts as young plants that have been grown in a nursery and are ready to be transplanted. So those seedlings or starter plants, and potted plants, which it would define as any herbaceous horticultural or ornamental plant sold in a container that is less than a gallon in size and that is not a nursery start. So these would be prohibitions on the use of neonicotinoid pesticides, the ban of which comes into effect this July. On those two things, but just to clarify, that's the use of neonicotinoids. So they would have to be presumably shipped in, and you wouldn't be able to apply neonicotinoids. I know there was some discussion on changing or expanding this to include the sale of either nursery starts or potted plants that have previously been treated with neonicotinoid pesticides. And that wraps up my segment.
Thanks, Zach. Any questions on those? We'll keep tracking. Oh, go ahead, Roy.
I don't have a question for Zach, but I was trying to swallow my spinach salad sandwich when um Pam was talking earlier, so I couldn't pose my question. So apologies for going back a little bit. I wanted to know whether any of our regional neighbors are doing any work on PFAS prohibitions or whatever, and to what extent, and how might that impact our action here in Vermont? Don't know if you know, this is a very general question. I did get a query from somebody at Rutgers University asking what Vermont was doing about PFAS.
That question is actually one of the charges that I didn't cover here because it's not related to our agency. But ANR has been directed to come back to the legislature next year with a summary of what the neighboring states are doing. And it's a bit of a scattershot, right? Like there's some things are being banned in some states with some definitions. And I think there's while we're talking, I'm going to work on remembering the name of the website, but there is a nice website that aggregates each state's prohibitions, and I'll try to get that in the chat.
Oh, that'd be cool. Thank you.
Go ahead, Steve Dueno.
Yeah, I just wondered, Pam, is there a particular person at ANR or DC that's dealing with that Roy could contact if he wanted more information of putting that report together?
All arrows point to Matt Chapman, the director of, I can't remember but I'll get you that, the unit he's the director of. I think it's waste management, but Pam, you might know.
Yeah, that's right. And also, including Matt, we also have Eamon Tuig, who is the expert at biosolids. And Matt, he works for Matt, but is also the expert who could address that. I think Numoa, oh no, it's Nuipik who's hosting that regional clearinghouse, Pam?
Namoa. I think it's Namoa.
Okay.
Because that's, but I could be wrong.
So far as it concerns anti-coagulants in rodents, Zach, is this referencing only vitamin K or other anticoagulants? I mean, are there others? Can you name potentially what anticoagulants this was referring to?
Yeah, I can go ahead and answer that, Roy. That it's all the first and second generation anticoagulants. It does not include cholecalciferol, which is the vitamin you're talking about. It's the first generations are like difascinone and chlorofascinone, and then the second generations are I'm going to remember. It's going to take me a minute to remember the names, but we have that list. One last session, the bill was passed to require that all second generation anticoagulants be classified as state restricted use. And so we did that. And I'll go ahead and put that list in the chat. But yeah, all the second generations now are restricted use. And the first generations are still general use by and large. And there are a few products that are not considered anticoagulants. The cholecalciferol, which has a different mode of action, and bromomethylene, which is not an anticoagulant. So the bill is specifically targeting the anticoagulants, both first and second generation.
Thanks. I did want to acknowledge we have a few more members that joined us. Abby, want to give a quick introduction?
Oh, yeah. Hi, Abby Pajak, Vermont DEC CAFO program.
Thanks, Abby. And Sean?
Yep, Sean Lucas, UVM Extension Agronomist in the Middlebury office. I'm sorry I was a couple minutes late. I got caught up in a support letter and was really deep diving on some things.
No problem, Sean. And I do want to say, so Sean is an official member now. He's been joining us for the last couple of meetings. But as of February, end of February, we had to officially say goodbye to Wendy Sue and thank you, and officially welcome Sean as a member filling that soil biologist spot. So
Yep,
thank you,
super
Sean.
excited to be here. Thank you.
Okay, the next update, we just wanted to kind of keep you guys updated. It's not super new, but so our best management practices for neonic treated seeds and the neonic pesticides that we've all worked on together is currently under internal legal review. So we did submit it. I think we told you in January 2. We submitted a draft rule. And we will move forward in the rulemaking process as soon as that internal legal review is complete. But also, I think we mentioned it in January, but there's lots of opportunities for comment throughout the whole formal rulemaking process. So we will keep you updated as we enter that and progress through it. Okay, so our agenda, I know, just says Agency of Ag update, but we are going to call on Brooke first. So she's kind of going to give us an apiary program update. And this we talked about in January. It came up what kind of testing we're doing. And Brooke chimed in last time she was on the call, but we're kind of trying to give her a little more time. And so welcome, Brooke. Thanks for sharing with us what you're up to.
Yeah, can you see my screen?
Yep.
My presentation and hear me okay, it sounds like?
Yep.
Excellent. So thanks for the introduction, Morgan. That's what I was going to say. So great. Hi, everybody. I have chimed in every now and again during meetings. So I'm happy to give you a little deeper dive into some context to what I do for the agency. So the presentation I'm going to give today for you all, I wanted to tell you about the apiary program and then give you some numbers about the Vermont beekeeping industry, and then share some results from this 3036 pollinator health study that I think has probably been the most referenced item that I've chimed in on, and then talk about some future initiatives. So there's a lot of numbers in there, but hopefully we're ending on a fun note here. So try to keep you engaged after lunch. So we are given the authority under Title VI, Chapter 172, Inspection of Apiaries. In total, there's about 15 individual statutes under that chapter, but I'm just going to go into a few here that highlight the most relevant for you all here. Try not to put everyone to sleep. Basically, the core of it is there's annual registration every year for all colonies in the state. So if you have one, or if you have 100 or 1,000 or 1,000,000, which is not common, then you would have to register those colonies annually with the agency and then pay $10 per apiary. So there could be many colonies in the apiary, but that is the structure we have. And the apiary location data is used for regulatory purposes. We use it, there's a part of the statute that I didn't go into here that gives a buffer around commercial apiaries. So we would use the location data for that, and then for inspections and general regulatory things that we need. But also we would use those, the registration data for notification of disease, invasive pests, potentially, or other emergencies like a declared public health emergency. It's very rare, but we could use the data for such items. So a lot of what we do, the core of what we do is field inspection. So we're going out and looking in colonies, inspecting for colony health. We look at brood diseases. We look for pests and pathogens. I'll try to slow down. I get very excited when I'm presenting, so sorry about that. we do regulatory inspections. So if bees are moving in and out of the state, they need inspections for that. And they also need health inspections for the sale of bees. So if you're buying bees in the state, they need to be inspected prior to sale. Or if you're selling bees, they need to be inspected before you sell them or give them away. A lot of what we do when we're in the field is provide management advice. You'll see the numbers in a couple slides. We have a lot of backyard beekeepers that are still on the learning curve of how to manage bees in the best way possible. So we do a lot of kind of extension type work in the field. Just some numbers so that the slides weren't full of words. In our field inspections from last year, we had, so the chart here, if you can see it, are the number of mites. It's the average mite count from the field inspections. So May, June, July, and August and September. And so any mites over, if the mite levels are at a 3% threshold or below, it's a sign of a healthier colony, and there's a likelihood of overwintering success. There's a lot of factors with that, but this is this major cause of bee pathogens and overwintering loss is because of this varroa mite. That's a pest that vectors diseases. So you can see here we have had in-field inspections fairly high, significantly high number of mites that we're finding in the field. Some numbers from our report last year show that the number of colonies in the state continues to increase. It has over the past years, but the number of apiaries has gone down just slightly. So basically, the number is about staying the same, but the number of colonies is increasing, and that's because a lot of our bigger operations are getting even bigger and keeping more bees in general. So by operation size, this is what I was referring to earlier. In 2024, there were about 553 backyard beekeepers that manage less than 20 colonies. So these are small, and most of those are, you know, people managing 1 to 2 colonies. They're just hobbyists and keeping a couple hives in the backyard for fun. So that's about 2,000 of the total colonies. But then on the other end, there are very few commercial operations that manage a vast majority of the bees. So about 14,000 colonies are managed by these commercial operations. And we here are defining commercial by 100 or more colonies. The industry level is they usually separated it out at 500, but we would only have a few. So in order to kind of keep it to our scale, this made the most sense to divide it up that way. You probably heard a lot about this, maybe. It seems to be a big topic of conversation in the apiary industry anyway. Winter colony loss. These numbers are from an annual survey that we send out. We'll actually send that out April 1st again, and get a report from beekeepers to share their winter colony loss. It's a big indicator of kind of how the bees are doing. It's the big question. How are the bees? Last year, so the winter from 23 to 24, there was a huge range of loss. Some people lost 0% and some people lost 100. So we tried to break it down in this chart here. But the highlight here is that backyard beekeepers lost the highest percentage of colonies. And then the commercial migratory beekeepers who manage a lot of colonies had the lowest losses. So there's different reasons for that. A lot of it's you know, moving the bees south for the winter. They aren't affected by certain things as much, and there's also just different management practices. Just numbers that we reported. You know, it's hard to analyze on one figure, but this is the data. Some other data from last year. When we do field samples, we'll take a sample of bees and send them to the lab to be tested for pathogens. And of the 90 samples that we sent in, the highlighted here are the 3 highest detection rates. And so deformed wing virus A and B, the 25% detection rate and 73% detection rate are associated with the varroa mite. Correlates to that high varroa load slide from earlier that you would expect to see these pathogens in these bees that have high varroa loads. Nosema serrana is a gut pathogen, and it's fairly mysterious. There's a lot of research going on about it now, and I won't bore you too much, but it often presents itself as this, the bees, the colony just has a failure to thrive. They don't grow, they don't function very well, so they just look very weak and unhealthy. They can sometimes be boosted out of that with nutrition, sometimes not. So it's kind of a mysterious one that's always a head scratcher, and there's not too much beekeepers can do. And if you're not totally bored yet, we'll go into some, the statute of 3036. So we toss this number around a lot. We love it. So this became effective in July of 2022. And then in 2023, we did our first trial year, and then in 2024, we did a more robust study. So what this slide says is that we are tasked with monitoring pollinator health to establish pollinator benchmarks that includes the presence of pesticides in hives, mite pressure, disease pressure, mite control methods, genetic influence on survival, winter survival rate, and forage availability. So some keywords that you've already heard before, but I'm going to go into some of those and talk to you about how we did that. So the design is we have 6 enrolled apiaries that we sample monthly, May through September. So in the May through September time, we are going and setting pollen traps, and we are taking a sample of bees. And I kind of jumped ahead a bit, but so for the presence of pesticides in hives, we set up these tracks on the outside of the beehive that the bees have to go through in order to get into the hive, which is their job, and this is what they do. And so they push really hard, and it basically they squeeze through these little holes in a screen, and they drop the pollen into a basket, and we save that and send it into the lab for analysis. In 2023, we used this lab QSI in California. And then in 2024, we got a new contract with the USDA lab in Gastonia. So the 2023 samples we got back. So I mentioned it was a trial year. It is pollen trapping is not easy, and it's not easy on your own hives, and then to go on to someone else's and figure that out I found that to be very challenging. So the first year, 2023, we were able to get 8 different pollen samples from 3 different locations. 5 of those had levels at or above the limit of quantification of 0.01 parts per billion. 3 of those 3 different pesticides were detected from those samples: DEET, Icardian, and bifenthrin. 4 of the samples had pesticide residues below the limit of quantification. So we got test results that just said pesticide residue under the limit of quantification. So they couldn't quantify it. There was something there, but their machines couldn't detect or couldn't quantify it. 1 of those samples had levels of pesticide, the bifenthrin, which is classified as highly toxic to bees at levels higher than the LD50. So very toxic to bees. It's surprising that that the bees were able to, well, they hadn't consumed it. So I don't know. This is not I'm not going to analyze that too much. This is the data. 3 samples showed levels of pesticides that were classified as non-toxic to bees. In 2024, we're waiting on the results. Looking forward to seeing those. I know the USDA lab has updated their equipment to have lower levels, lower limits of quantification and detection levels. So that will be very interesting to see how they compare to the other lab we used. So back to that list of the items that we're sampling for the survey, the mite pressure was item B. We, in 2023, did 32 different mite counts. 5 of those counts were, or 15% of them, were above that economic threshold of 3%. So again, those studies show that colonies with that level of mites that's above 3% shows increased mortality rate, especially during the winter months. In 2024, we were able to do 44 mite counts, and 20% had levels of infestation at or above the economic threshold. The disease pressure, so the pathogen report from those bees and these, just the 3036 samples, looks very similar to what we're seeing in the other field samples, that these associated with the varroa mites, the deformed wing virus A and B are high, and then that Nosema serrana is also on the high end of detection rate. Oh, that was in 23. This is 24. Same thing. In 2023, we had 6 apiaries still, and 4 of the beekeepers used management practices that used miticide, at least one miticide, to control their varroa mites. 2 of the beekeepers in that survey that were part of the survey that year were treatment-free, so did not use any miticides at all. They used different management practices to try to keep their levels low. In 2024, we had 2 people didn't want to do the survey again, and so we found 2 new people. So now 5 of the 6 beekeepers that are enrolled in the study use at least one miticide to control their mite levels when they reach that threshold, and then 1 that will use a miticide only at a certain time of year and only if they're like really high. So it's not at that 3%. They just said well above. So risky for overwintering. So this is the part of the presentation that I am most excited about and wanted to share with you all. So hopefully I haven't overdone my talk so far. But so for the forage availability section of 3036, we use this really cool, what I think is cool app, or I guess it's a web app that is called Beescape. So you can type in an address and it plots it on a map and it pulls up the different layers. Those of you who maybe are familiar with GIS, there's different like USGS layers that you can put in there. I don't know how it works, but it somehow pulls up, you can set the radius and it pulls up the habitat quality for nesting. Is super tiny on my end. I can't read what it says. Let me pull it up on a different screen here. It says, I think it says nesting availability for wild bees. So it gives a rating for nesting availability for wild bees for spring and floral resources, for summer floral resources, fall floral resources, and then crop insecticide index. So this has been really fun to plot for each of the apiaries on for the report. So this, I think, part of the reason I got asked to present, because it came up, there was a question about, are we testing any apiaries in this study that are adjacent to cornfields? So I had all of our locations plotted in Beescape, and I had them all set on the 3-mile range. Bees will fly up to 3 miles. And what I found was the apiary that had the most amount of corn was only 5%, which is surprising to me because this is a spot when you look from the apiary, it's like it looks like there's a lot of corn around, but when you actually do like a bee's eye view, they can fly really far. And so, I guess our eyes see things different than they do. So this is the site with the most amount of corn adjacent. And so it says it's 5% corn. So I reduced it down to a 1 mile radius because bees will fly 3 miles, but if there's other forage, they'll stay a little closer. So just to play around a little bit, that made the corn go up to 7%. And so then if folks can't see, the green is the forest. So this is the land use layer. So there's 55% forest and then 25% pasture and hay, and then just 7% corn. So this got me thinking. and so I would like to, if I have time, hopefully play around for a second live with you all on the Beescape app, because what I did was jumped outside of where we're testing the apiaries, and I started playing around in the Champlain Valley. And so Morgan, do we have like a couple extra minutes?
Yeah. Go. It's okay.
Okay,
Yep.
cool. I think I'm gonna stop sharing this, and I have to hop on to my Beescape. If folks are up for it, I thought that this would be a fun activity. So what I did when I was putting this together, I'll give you some context. I thought, well, geez, 8% corn, this is like, that's nothing, I mean, it's not nothing, but it's like, I thought that it would be higher. So I played around, and I went into the Champlain Valley and was searching for corn. And so I would be happy to type in, let me share this screen. I would be happy to type in, let me get this up here, sorry. Okay. I would be happy to type, I'm still not sharing, am I? Sorry. This is improv here. Share. There we go. Okay. Somebody give me an address. This is what I just plotted, and it had corn at 14%, and that's near New Haven and Virgins. So if someone wants to give me like a location, or we just use this one and I can delete it, or I don't know, somebody shout out something. Steve.
Yeah, why don't you use my address, 41 Mount Independence Road, Orwell.
Mount
Independence Road.
Independence Road. Now
Yeah.
it's public record, Steve, that we know where you live. All right, I'm gonna plot this 1 mile range in your back field here.
Mm-hmm.
So it pulls up that there's 6% corn, 51% hay, 26% forest, there's water and wetland, 7% developed. So it also looks like there's 34% good availability for wild bees. There's decent 45% spring floral resources, great summer, but then the fall drops back down again. And so this is going to be my little rant or something. So my thinking is that, and we can play around with this some more, but in all the sites that we did on our 3036 study, we used or the result was there's really low fall floral availability. So that was just interesting to me. And so then I know that corn comes into it too. And so I know that maybe planting something that wouldn't deter the bees from going to the corn in the fall would be a way to maybe balance some things out. That's my little soapbox, but I'm happy to play around with another area if you want, and then we can talk about the our next initiatives that hopefully we'll get to use this map for. You know, this, I just think this is such a fun tool to play around with. Here we're at 14% corn. I had a hard time finding more than 20% corn, which was so surprising to me, especially in these areas of the Champlain Valley, where in my mind you just see a lot of corn and you see a lot of, you know, it's just a lot. It's actually more pasture and hay, according to this. I'm not giving this like, you know, there's probably some variability in here, but that's my little thing. If you want to play around with it, it's called Beastscape. And then with that, I have one more slide that talks about our current initiatives. Let's see here, present in teams. Is that going?
We don't see it yet.
Oh, there we go.
Yep.
All right, now we're back at the beginning. Fly through. So with that, I'm hoping that we can use that Beastscape resource in these future projects that we're working on. One of which is collaborating with the AOT, Agency of Transportation, enhancing pollinator habitat along the interstate. We're working with the Vermont Center for Eco Studies on a pollinator study. And then what we're going to do, we haven't done it yet, but we have the pollen samples that we tested for pesticides from the past 2 years and want to send them out for botanical identification to understand what the bees are foraging on. So with that, and thank you for letting me share my discovery of that fun map, there's my info.
Thanks, Brooke. Go ahead, Steve. You have a question?
Yeah, one thing I always want to point out is that this is a long-term project, okay? This isn't just a one-time thing. This is something that, you know, ideally will keep going on for decades. It's in the statute. We're set aside resources to do it. We're going to keep doing it, keep refining it, and keep going forward on it. And you'd be very interested in any comments from any of the folks on the AIB about the study and what we're looking at, and if there, you know, any suggestions or comments, and we can, you know, Brooke can come back, you know, as often as necessary to let us know what she's finding out there, to keep track of this. So just want to point that out. Thanks.
Go ahead, Sean.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
On the varroa mite study where you were showing kind of like varroa mite population over time, it seemed like it was kind of low in May, then it spiked in June, then it dropped down again in July. Is that, and then it went way up in August and September, right? Is that humidity driven?
No, it's mostly, well, so it's the life cycle of the varroa mite. It reproduces in the brood, and some of that, so there's a caveat in there. I should have it's not my forte to like make the best charts probably, but the number of inspections probably should be in there because during July there's a lot of honey supers on, so we don't tend to do as many inspections in July. So it was more that we didn't do that many, and so it's a little skewed. But the curve of the population, it's common to see a spike at the end. August, September are the really high mite times, just because of the population growth in the brood.
And then I had another question. And then I have a comment after this, if that's okay. I don't want to suck up all the time. I'm drawing a blank up. Let me go to my comment. I know that I worked closely when I was in Kentucky with our bee specialist at Kentucky State University, and you mentioned the lack of forage in the fall. we were working with some organic producers. Obviously, you're not going to take out all the corn and replace it with anything, right? But we found that buckwheat was really good, sort of at filling in that uh, pollen and forage availability gap. And the bees really seemed to like it. The other thing they seemed to like was hemp that was not being and hemp is wind pollinated, so that was kind of weird to me that they would like hemp, but for whatever reason, maybe they were going after the resins or whatever, but the bees seemed to be drawn to the hemp. You could go through a hemp field and find the male plants that they would just have the bee buzz to them. Let me see. I guess I'll when my mind stops blanking out on the second question I had, I'll put it in the chat.
Thanks, that's great.
Go ahead, Mike.
Hi, thanks. I wanted to go back to the point about colony losses and the difference between commercial scale and everybody else was remarkable. What are some of the factors there?
You know, a lot of it is different management styles, I think. Yeah, it's hard to know. There's a lot to kind of tease out there. It's not just that they're migratory, I don't think, but I think that has something to do with it, that those bees leave the state in like some late September, most of them in October, and then they go south, and they're still like they go to Georgia and Florida and South Carolina, and so there's still like nutrition. They're not just in their hive not flying. There's forage for them most of the year in Georgia and Florida. Some places in Florida, at least, there's no break of pollen. There's always some kind of pollen coming in. But I know that in Georgia and South Carolina, the maple starts blooming in like January. So the winter, the time where they're inactive and just in this kind of torpor mode that they're in is less, and their beekeepers, they're able to manipulate the hives more. So there's kind of a lot of factors. You're able to work the bees longer. So a loss that might happen in November would have gotten caught in October, because they're able to work their bees more. Do you know what I mean? It's like bees are not mammals. So they're insects, so it's hard to just relate them in that way, if that makes sense.
Thanks.
I remembered my
Sean.
other question, thanks to Mike.
Nope.
Mike must have been like delving the back of my mind to dredge that up. So specifically, I wanted to ask on that point that Mike raised. You said that the commercial growers seem to have better control compared to backyard growers over the mite population. As I'm a crops and soils guy, I'm not a bee specialist, but as extension, one of the thoughts that comes to my mind is do the backyard growers maybe have a lack of access to good information on using pesticides or other products to help control the mites?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is education. Well, for one, it's like a learning curve for bees, right? So there's like this huge learning curve understanding how to manage bees. It takes years, I mean, it's not easy. And then you have a varroa mite that is it's like a period on the end of a sentence, right? That's on the bee, and if you see them on a bee, it's too late. And so the sampling method that you use to make, to understand your mite levels is that you kill half a cup of bees. And a lot of beginner beekeepers don't want to kill 300 bees. It's just a huge learning curve. So, I know there's a lot of resources for beekeepers, but it really just like takes time, and then there's a curveball. It's just a weird something, that it's hard to know what happened. I mean, even the best beekeepers have bad years, so it's so complicated that But really what we try to say is monitor monthly and then pre and post treatment so that you understand if your miticide works. I can tell you a lot of times when I do inspections in the fall, the backyard beekeeper will say, I just put a miticide on and they're taking it off, and we do a mite count and it's like 25 and it should be 3, so it didn't work, or we don't know what, so there's just a lot of factors. So it's education and observation is a lot of it too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Brooke. A ton. We'll keep on bugging you if as you learn more, and as we obviously are always interested in this. So thanks, Brooke, for all that you do.
Yeah, hopefully when I get the pesticide results, I think that'll be the most exciting thing to share.
Sure. Yeah,
Excellent.
I'll keep bugging you, but
please.
Okay, so the second part of our update, so sorry, Mike, but this gets at the introduction to what we've asked you to join us today. So Stephanie Smith is going to give a quick rundown of Ag Plastic and the agency, and a little bit of history. So she's going to set you up, Mike, for our next thing. Go ahead, Steph.
And that's my presentation. And if you bear with me, I will get into it. So, so Stephanie Smith with the Agency of Agriculture. I'm just going to give a little background concerning agricultural plastic, and it's generally it's going to be where we are, like in terms of what the AIB's responsibility is and what information the agency knows about, and a little bit of the survey and the pulse of the community, as well as a little bit about the types of agricultural plastics that get used in the system, in the agricultural system. So the Agricultural Innovation Board actually has amongst their charge, I guess is what we've been calling it. There are 2 points that are made, and one is to recommend practices to reduce the use and generation of waste associated with plastic in farming. And then another one is to study and issue recommendations regarding the feasibility of the use of biodegradable plastics in agriculture and the promotion of the use of and production of biodegradable plastics and similar products in Vermont, which is actually pretty daunting. I think the second one in particular, in terms of trying to be able to study and issue recommendations regarding the feasibility of using a different product. So with that in mind, I'm going to cover a little bit about the types of agricultural plastic that are used in the agricultural systems. And so for crop production, there's plastic mulch, there's irrigation taper tubes, hoop houses, row covers, trellising, clips and ties, and fruit crop netting. And this isn't an all-inclusive list. This is just kind of, actually, I think most of this was pulled from the survey that we had done initially in 2022, and what is used by various types of farming in the state of Vermont. And the reason we use that these are used is that they typically aid in production. They lengthen the season, or you can start your season earlier in terms of vegetables and fruits in the field. There's crop protection, so it might protect the crop from a pest or something that would otherwise eat your crop. There's weed control, and then I understand in organic production that in some instances, and I'll let organic producers and those familiar with organic production to comment more, but it's for organic production and to maybe control weeds, it is a preferred method is to use plastic. And it might be the only thing that's allowed in certain circumstances relative to the action you're trying to take as an organic producer. In livestock, there's bale wrap, and these are estimates of what was used in 2019. So 2,775 tons are used annually as of 2019. Bale twine and netting, is a different kind of bale wrap. There's bunker cover hoof blocks, which are health aids for animals, I understand. Silage tubes, and then any kind of agricultural input can come in a plastic bag. And then you as a producer are responsible for managing that waste responsibly. So in the livestock industry, and again, I defer to those that work in the livestock industry, but I understand that the ag bags or the bale wrap actually increases the quality of the feed. It also protects the feed from going bad. So you might ferment your silage in one of these bags, and it increases, I think, protein in that silage. And then also there are environmental benefits in terms of protecting water quality and the environment by using some of these materials in your ag production, as well as these materials in all industries create some ability for or make production more flexible. In the nursery industry, we have plastic mulch, nursery pots, irrigation again, plug trays, and then greenhouse plastic, or the polyethylene that covers greenhouses. Again, it's weed suppression. It might facilitate retail sales in terms of the packaging that's associated with selling those nursery starts or those potted plants, and generally just assists in the production system. Other kinds of agricultural plastic used in agriculture, or plastic used in agriculture. So pellet storage, apiary supplies, I understand that they can be made of plastic. Agricultural inputs again, and maple tubing. In, again, 2019, 390 estimated tons used annually. Where does it go? Primarily it goes to landfill. It's not, there are very few opportunities to recycle in the state of Vermont. Actually, yeah, very few, almost none. But in some instances, I think maybe this is in the nursery industry, those pots might get sterilized and reused. And in some instances, the material is burned or buried. Or just stored and not managed. And the storage of these plastics in the field, and in terms of anybody who has plastic in their yard, including in ag production, they can allow for mosquitoes to breed. They can hold water and just become habitat. So not good in terms of storage and not managing that. So what does it cost to dispose of agricultural plastic? So there was an estimate, 2019, last time, or when information was collected, it was about $125 per ton. In 2001, landfill accepted 3,590 tons of plastic, and the estimated cost is about $500,000 a year. And I believe that this is probably no longer accurate because it is from 2019, so it's probably has increased since then. So what are the challenges? This is an image of the solid waste management entities in the state of Vermont. The Department of Environmental Conservation works very closely with these solid waste management entities. But it's so some of the challenges to moving away from plastics are there alternatives, probably not identified with the same kinds of functionality that the plastic material has. If you want to recycle something, do we have the infrastructure across the state to store and process that plastic? Is it convenient for producers to get that plastic, that, let's just use silage wrap as an example, to somebody who then would be able to recycle it, like the transport of it? And then do we have a market for that plastic material? Because it's not the same for every type of plastic, and there are multiple different types of plastic, but it's hard to find appropriate markets. So so there has been some recycling programs in the region. So I understand NMOA which is the Northeast Waste Management Officials Association, and they were actually mentioned earlier. I can't remember if Pam can confirm or deny that NMOA is the organization with the PFAS page. But we don't have to talk about that now. Anyway, that's the context of what it was mentioned earlier today. They did some training in 2008 and 2009 and gave out money to institute some recycling programs, pilot programs. In Vermont, Casella and Agrimark Cabot Creamery Cooperative did a pilot project in 2014 that's no longer operating. In New York, the last bullet there, there was a recycling ag plastics project that ceased operation in 2016. But I am aware that in Maine, a recycling program was set up and is now currently run by the Maine Organic Farmers and Gardeners Association, and they recycle the low density polyethylene plastic number 4. And it is greenhouse cover is what they recycle, and they still operate as an example of a program, and they've been operating since 2020. Just to talk about other kinds of plastic, I did mention that different kinds of agricultural inputs come in plastic containers, pesticides and medicines being 2 examples. There is the Agricultural Container Recycling Council that Vermont participates in, and it is a nonprofit organization that contracts with plastic recyclers for pesticide containers and medicines, and it is free for producers to bring their clean, with no residue pesticide containers to a location in Vermont to have those recycled. Those pesticide containers are recycled into products that are suitable for because you had pesticides in that plastic container, then the products that you can then use from the recycled resin is very particular because you don't want to have, obviously, contact food would be an example of something that you wouldn't want to recycle that plastic into that kind of packaging. But it is free. The 2 links in this presentation there that are kind of bluish are, one is to the ACRC, and then the other is to the Ag Container, is to our recycling organization. I think it's called Ag Solutions, is the contractor that picks up the pesticide containers in Vermont. Additionally, the agency in 2024 held listening sessions, and some of the themes that came up in some areas is the desire for the ability to recycle agricultural plastic and for it to be convenient. And the agency certainly supports those ideas, those potential policies that could come out of either the Agency of Natural Resources and their Solid Waste Management Department. And then as well, we would be a partner in promoting any activities around recycling agricultural plastic in our state. And there's my contact information. And now I'm going to introduce Mike Snow, who is the executive director of the Connecticut River Watershed Farmers Alliance. And he is a grower of dry beans and grains, I understand. Based on an internet search, Mike, you can talk a little bit more about yourself. And they, at the Connecticut River Watershed Farmers Alliance, they are piloting a ag plastic recycling program. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
Hi, thanks, Stephanie. That's right. So I'm a grower too, and also the part-time executive director of the CRWFA, which is a little easier to say than our full name. But I think the main thing to say is that we're a network of farmers in the largest watershed in Vermont. Our membership is on both sides of the river, so New Hampshire and Vermont, and from top to bottom. And can I share? How do I share screen? Do I have access to that?
Yeah, you should. It's right next to the red like phone button, there's a square with an up arrow. Yep, we see us.
What do you see you? Okay, so sorry.
That's okay.
I mean, you're all lovely. You're all lovely. All right. Do you see a slideshow right now?
Yep.
Okay, good. All right, so that's a lot of words. Hold on, let me just. I have struggled with Teams really quite a bit. In fact, one time I had a job interview and I tried logging into Teams and it took me 20 minutes, and finally we went to Zoom.
Well, you're doing great.
Job. Okay. Well, this may be the best I can do. Okay, no. How do I undo that? Oh, shoot. Nope. Okay, you're gonna see what I see.
That's fine.
This is not fine. Let's see, normal. There we go. Okay, anyways, so our reason d'etre is to support each other as farmers and working on water quality and conservation work. But we also think that part of that supporting each other in the conservation work is also thinking about our what it takes to be viable farms and to provide some social support too, because there are a lot less of us and we need friends. And I'm not sure why this is. Okay. Anyways, it's worth saying that you know, the way that we think that change happens is by getting people together. So all stakeholders. We think that as farmers dealing with issues related to agriculture, we're good at coming up with solutions to problems, and especially as part of a group doing that, and that we hope that folks in agencies and in government and in our communities will sort of look to us for that. And I think the last piece is this sort of cooperative problem solving, which is really what our Ag Plastics program is. And I'll get into that in just a second. All right, so just to give you a sense of where we are, we need the watershed map. As you can see, it's a big part of our state. I don't know if you guys realize that, but there are farms over here on this side. And don't forget us. I know a lot of the water quality work is done around the Champlain Basin, mainly because that water stays in one place. And so you see the effects of pollution, or, you know, you see the bad stuff more, it's more in your face. Of course, our bad stuff gets washed away down to the Long Island Sound. Not that we have bad stuff. I mean, everything's perfect on the side of the state, but just to say, you know, we have sort of a different type of watershed. And we have a lot of basins. And so I don't know if you can see, but right now we're really trying to think of ourselves in terms of those sub-basins, which are like they're the tactical basins in Vermont, and then New Hampshire, they kind of look at it a little bit differently because they don't want to regulate or make decisions like that. But we like this because in terms of organizing ourselves socially and logistically, that's important, and I'll explain that in a second too. Anyways, the things we do field days and workshops, we do advocacy, we have an equipment sharing program, a rental program, which is growing again, and then this collaborative problem solving. We don't need to go into too much of this, but I'm glad to talk about it. Our workshops generally are around water quality, either directly or sometimes it's sort of through soil health or diversification, basically things that affect water quality, right? But maybe aren't sort of on the short list of the big topics. We also have regular meetings. We meet every month, just about every month. In the summer, we usually take a month or two off because we're busy. And this year we're doing something a little bit different where we have our business meeting at the beginning, but then we have a topic of some sort and conversation around it. Second Tuesday of every month. You're welcome. Equipment library. Our new thing that we're working on is strip till. Anyways, and we don't need to. Okay. All right. So plastics. First of all, any questions about who we are? Stop me because I can't see you.
I think you're good to go.
Are you still there? Okay, good.
Yes, we're here.
Okay, good. So Stephanie made some really good points, right? There's a lot of plastic. We use plastic, well, like anything, I think the way to think about it is barrels of oil translate into like hundreds of thousands of people, the energy of people. Like one barrel of oil is like 400,000 people, right? So it's like these little petro slaves that help us do work in some form or other. And there are trade-offs, like anything in agriculture and anything in life and existing. But there's these trade-offs, right? So, you know, Stephanie had asked about said something about black plastic as mulch, and I'm an organic farmer too, and as an organic farmer, do we need it? Like, we don't need it, and I try not to use it. I use it a little bit, but the trade-off is if we don't use black plastic, then we're using cultivation, right? I mean, that in the sky, we say we want to find, you know, perennial polycultures that will feed us, and that's a great project, but we're not there. And right now, people want tomatoes and peppers and things like that, and they grow best here if we're using plastic. So just to say, there's a reason why there's plastic in the case of bale wrap and silage tarps, right? Bunk wrap. Those are the biggest plastics in volume that we use in Vermont. And they're part of the water quality puzzle, right? I mean, the water quality programs, SEEP grants go to helping people buy bale wrappers, right? So on one hand, they might, because they help control runoff, right? They protect stuff, and so there's less nutrients running off. But right now, and that's how water quality is defined programmatically. But we don't know much about, well, what about the microplastics and the nanoplastics and the PFAS and the PNAS and stuff like that. So just to say again, like there are these trade-offs. You know, bale wrap can be really handy given changes in weather patterns, because we have might have shorter periods of time to make hay, and you don't need as much time when you're going to ferment it, make silage or baleage when they're wrapped. But on the other hand, you don't want to use wrapped bales if you're making cheese. That's not okay. And there might be other animals that don't prefer it. Just to say, it's complicated, right? Anyways, none of us like using it. None of us do. And I hope you will realize or accept the idea that as farmers, like we don't like throwing this stuff away. We barely like using it, and that's only if it, because it's hard to exist economically without it, honestly. So what we're doing, we had several farms who have been trying to figure out and participate in these different recycling programs, the Cabot one, and before, even 20 years ago, 30 years ago, who are just tired of it. And they're a little older, so they're kind of stepping back, and they have a little more time to put into this, like Guy Crosby of Clay Hill Farm in Heartland area. And so as an organization, we're saying, hey, here's some of our members who are trying to solve a problem. Let's work together. That's going to be our best bet right now, because there really isn't any support. And I don't mean, there aren't other programs right now. A lot of that is because it doesn't pay. Dirty plastic is not worth very much. And that's even if anyone will take it, There are very few places that do. And that has to do with the economics of what they're doing and whether or not they want to wash it. There are some places that will wash the plastic when it comes in as part of their process, and other places that won't. So like Trex is a well-known potential market for plastics. They don't wash it, so they don't want anything from us. We ended up tracking down a few potential markets, and we're fairly committed right now to one. I'll come back to that in a second. Fairly committed to one EFS, which is based in Canada, but they also have plants in the US. And at first we thought we might get in on the Canadian program because in Canada, you're supposed to do this, and it's a quasi, I think it's a government program where they'll collect the stuff and they take it to Ontario somewhere. And anyways, they want this kind of plastic to go down to Pennsylvania. And so the big picture thing is, here's the big picture thing. So how does it work? Farms join, they gotta become members. And that goes toward the money. It's a nominal membership, right? So we give them super sacks, like sling bags, because that seems to be the easiest thing for us right now. There's a program in Pennsylvania, a pilot program that costs quite a bit of money, but because they were paying for dumpsters to go to farms, we can't afford that, and we don't know that that's even the best way yet. So we're doing these that we use used bags. We give them to a farm. The farm fills it up and is expected to keep it covered so that the bale wrap stays clean and dry, reasonably clean and dry. The EFS they'll either dock us and pay, or they won't accept our plastic if it's got too much stuff in it. So that means that there have to be some best management practices on the farm end. So once they fill it up, they let us know. We pick them up. We try to coordinate that pickup so that we have full truck, and then we leave fresh totes. We bring stuff back to Guy's place right now. Guy then takes it on a trailer, takes it to a place that will bale for us. It's been difficult to find those places, but we think we've worked it out, and we're starting to build those relationships. So what happens is the plastic gets unloaded. It goes up into a conveyor, conveyed up into a baler, and then the baler compacts it. Just for those of you who have never been to the solid waste district, they compact it into these bales. I don't know, can you see? They get wrapped with some metal twine, and then we take that again, and I'll explain why in a second. So the bales get put back onto the trailer, and they go back to Guy's place until we have enough of them that we can send a full truckload down to Pennsylvania so that it's cost effective to transport. All right, I've said a lot so far. You have any questions? Are you there? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. I have a really quick question, and I may have missed it, so I'm just trying to take notes. What is the place, did you mention where in Pennsylvania you're going?
It's Hazleton, Pennsylvania.
Is it a name?
EFS.
Sorry.
EFS.
EFS. Okay, sorry. I knew I missed something.
EFS Plastics.
Okay, thank you.
They've been the most consistent folks that we've talked to so far. You know, it's been challenging. It seems like this should be easy to set up, but you know, just the world of people who just, you know how things are, right? People don't return calls, or they, you know, we think everything's good and then they disappear, and there's been a fair bit of that. But so let me go back to the thing, and just to give you a sense of the map. So far we have over 50 farms that have started this winter. They're kind of spread out all along the watershed. like way up at the top, we have folks who want to be part of this. Up in Coas County, like Canada, but we haven't figured out. We haven't taken from them yet because they're too far right now. But we're working on how to best do that. And so what we're so we did get a grant this winter to help support this pilot, and that's a Working Lands grant. So if any of you are from the Working Lands Enterprise group, thank you very much. It makes a really big difference. And that's basically allowing us to work out the kinks of how this can best happen. So we have a certain number of funds for the next year and a half or so. And so this winter, we're sort of just making it happen and putting our heads down, and Guy is driving a lot. And he brings stuff back to him, and then we take to the Lebanon Solid Waste District, Lebanon, New Hampshire. We've also made bales down in Brattleboro, and we're about to make a couple bales up in Lindenville, north the NEK Waste District. Who at first, all of these places at first are like, no, we're not doing this. And the reason for that is because they think that means that people are going to bring a whole bunch of plastic and it's going to lay around and they're going to have to deal with it. And then afterwards, they're going to have to hold on to the bale. So basically, they don't have any storage and any space, right? There's just no space, and they don't want to deal with it. But what we've done so far is we say, all right, we're going to bring a ton, enough to make one bale, and we're taking the bale back with us. So you don't have to worry about storage. Just give us an hour of your time. We'll pay you for it, and we'll clean up the mess. We're ready to do that. So as place now, when we approach a place, we say, can we make a bale? Here's what we want. Here's what we need. Places are more open. So NEK I think we're going next week for 1 or 2 bales. And so what we're going to do there is take stuff that's from NEK, that area. So we're starting to decentralize and distribute our bale production, right? And that's sort of the next step with this, to figure out what are the best geographies for all of this. That's the big picture. I can go into more detail, but I think I'll do it by taking your questions now.
Does anybody have? Go ahead,
Hey,
Steve.
Yeah, so great thing that you're doing. Really appreciate you guys doing this work. Have you actually sold any of, or has any of the finished bales been delivered to somebody who's paying for them, or how's that going to work?
Not yet. So we were hold on a second. Let me got some feedback. No, so not yet. We were going to take one down this fall. It didn't happen, and so now we're sort of waiting to have at least 5, so 5 1-ton bales, and we'll take a full truckload. So
any idea how much they'll pay for them, or what their value is?
Yeah, no, pennies. We're talking pennies. This is the thing, right? So I think it's 4 to 6 cents a pound, which means that our estimate for trucking down of like 20 tons, or 20 bales, right, would be on a tractor trailer. Basically, we're going to come out even if we're lucky. So essentially, selling this stuff covers the cost of getting it from Vermont down to Pennsylvania. This is our estimate, right? So that means that the cost of actually getting plastic from farms and baled, compacted, that we have to figure out how much is that really going to cost, and so how are we going to pay for that? Which we think will end up, we're optimistic. Casella won't do this because it doesn't make them any money, right? I'm sorry if there's anyone from Casella here, but that's what we were told, right? They did the pilot, that's great, but it's not a moneymaker, so they're not really willing to do it. So for us, we don't have shareholders that we have to respond to in that way, and if we can come out even, our goal is to have the cost of doing this for the farmer to be cost competitive with tossing it with the landfill, and preferably more convenient, just like Stephanie was saying. Steve Schubart.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Really fascinating. Bale plastic we have with our round bales for our cattle, and it is a big pain to deal with. But as you were explaining the aggregation process, collecting, et cetera, it started, I just started thinking about carbon footprint, and it absolutely makes sense that recycling, I guess, is a better option than a landfill. But has there been any carbon footprint calculations with this, or is that, is that already solved essentially by recycling it and keeping it out of a landfill?
No, I mean, I think so that would be that's great. Like, let's do that. My guess, just having like an interest in life cycle assessments and energies, right? Like all that stuff. My guess is like, no, none of this is like makes any sense. I mean, the fact that we pull old sunlight out of the ground and turn it into something white and flexible, like it's just, no, there's the carbon footprint of all of this is ridiculous. And that's part of the problem, right? I mean, that's our, let's get into it. I mean, so, what are we comparing it to? Right now, it's going to go to Cambridge, right? So lots of people taking their own junk up to Cambridge, I think, who, by the way, is concerned about the PFAS that are leaking out of the thing. How does that there's no carbon footprint piece of that, right? And that's the limit. That's one of the problems with saying what's the carbon footprint? What are the other footprints, right? So I don't know, but that would be, part of this. One of the next step, like part of our year now, is going to be after this season. After spring, we'll kind of regroup this summer and say, all right, well, what went well, what didn't, and look at the geography of this and how do we minimize the driving, all that stuff. And in a sense, those miles will be a proxy for carbon footprint, right? But if someone at UVM or Dartmouth or UNH who are interested in doing that, that would be really cool.
I don't know. I've got my hand up.
Go ahead, Sean.
Sean,
Sorry,
yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
ready. Yeah.
That's quite a hike to Hazleton. I mean, I grew up in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, so I know that area. It's what, 7-hour drive? Something like that from here?
Yeah, más o menos, yeah.
Something like that. Anyway, the facility in Hazleton, is that an aggregator, or do you know for sure that like they are actually recycling the plastic there into something usable? I mean, because you hear stories about how we do all this plastic recycling, but then it ends up in a landfill anyway, or in the in the Pacific Ocean in a big
Gyre.
swirling mass of plastic, right?
Yeah, so this is a plant.
Okay.
They take it and they process it, so they wash it, and then one of the reasons we're excited to go down there is to sort of see the process, get a tour. But yeah, this is a place. What they make is pellets for the next generation of plastic. And the ugly secret, I don't know if I should even say this because it's sort of like, well, what the fuck are we doing? Sorry, but the next most of this kind of plastic gets put into like trash bags so they can be put in the dump. That's not funny at all, but it makes me laugh. Yeah, yeah. So, part of our process with this is we do want to have conversations with them to ask what kind of durable goods we can make out of our bale wrap, basically. Like if we could make fence posts, that would be so cool, right? Recycle our bale wrap into fence posts that'll last for 10 years or something. So that would be great, but we don't know yet. Like I said, it can be difficult to have some of these conversations, so it's like one thing at a time.
And just so you know, you're on my to-do list this week. You're underlined, Mike. So we haven't forgot the. I need to reach out to you to get myself over there to a Connecticut River watershed. Thanks for the answer.
Yeah.
I think Leon is first. Yeah.
Yes, I have a question related to a product that I saw on a farm trip to California in 2012. They were recycling ag plastic and making replacement sidewalk panels. So when a concrete sidewalk panel cracked, they had made plastic ones to replace it with. And I actually walked on some of them. So when you go to Pennsylvania, that would be one thing to question them about, whether that is an option.
That's great. Thank you. I will. One of the things there are three of us sort of working on this right now, and I think Abby probably has the best. Annie McMillan, has the best grasp on this stuff. But there's so many there are these different kinds of plastics, right? And some of them seem to. One of the problems with plastics is that, and a lot of things, is that they degrade over time, right? So you might have your virgin plastic, which can be made into lots of different things, and then as they get used, it can't be, it may not be quality enough to be good stuff. And so that's part of what we're trying to figure out is, okay, so the bale wrap, like what can that be made into? And the greenhouse plastic, like what about that? And the tubing and the big nut to crack, honestly, is the silage tarps that cover bunks, I think. We haven't had any luck with that yet, but we're working on it. Thanks, Leon.
Go ahead, Steve.
Mike, maybe outside of the purview of the conversation, but another one that is silage tires. And I know that maybe that's just out of this completely, but it's just one that also it seems like there's less of a need. Like for instance, I don't have any dairy farming friends who are looking for me to bring tires anymore. And my farm came with a bunch of tires. And anyway, so that may be outside of the purview, but that's just another question.
Well, I see Steve's other Steve's hands up. I assume he's going to talk about the tire slashing project.
Yeah. So we do have a tire slicer. We have a tire slicer program that we're getting geared up to cut the sidewalls off. It doesn't dispose of the tires, but it makes them easier to handle and reduces mosquito breeding habitat. But I've heard that there's some either has been or will be introduced some legislation dealing with tires. Stephanie knows about that. So
yeah. So there's House Bill 204 that's been introduced, and its location is in the House Committee on the Environment. And I can put a link to the bill as introduced in the chat. But the title of the bill is an act relating to the collection and recycling of waste motor vehicle tires. So there is something that's moving to address waste motor vehicle. Well, it's not moving. I'm sorry. There is a bill introduced in the first year of a biennium to address waste tires. But I'll stick it in the chat.
Yeah, I mean, the Steve, your question about energy is an interesting one in that it's like, what are the effects of collecting and recycling the tires, how do they tend to get used? If I understand right, a lot of times they're either ground up and made into something that's probably not healthy for kids to be playing on, or sometimes they're burned for power and things like that. And what's the trade-off between repurposing them for weight on a farm? I don't know. Stuff's complicated because it's not a perfect world.
Yeah, I think, Steve, that actually kind of, Stephanie and I were just talking before this meeting of, we're trying to focus AIB, and we said, okay, well, we went and back and looked at what the statute said of what AIB was supposed to be looking at. And I'm like, well, is tires in that or not? So we were kind of talking back and forth. And what Stephanie showed is that it kind of is focused a little bit more on plastic. So we recognize that tires is a huge thing. Right now, it's not written in one of those charges for us. That being said, fine, but we could probably look at it if we need to, but maybe we're trying to okay, well, let's focus on the ones that are there right now. But we do recognize, that it is huge, and it might be the answer to the survey questions, right? So we brought Mike in today, and we kind of are dipping our toe in the water of this ag plastic topic because of what people wrote back in the survey that says ag waste, right? We want something better, either alternatives or this is our biggest challenge. And so that's why we're talking about this. That being said, I don't know if we were that specific in calling out plastic or tires in that survey. You know what I mean? So it could be that they're thinking of tires when they're answering that question, or if I'm thinking about plastic. So I guess that's on us for maybe not writing that question correctly. But are there any more questions for Mike? Thank you, Mike, so much. That was a great, I know that's not going to be the last that we hear of you. Yeah, go ahead. Stephanie has a question.
I know you're working with Annie McMillan, and Annie probably has a contact with ACRC, Mark Hudson, because they, they have that supply chain system down for the recycling of the pesticide containers, and the products that get made from them, they have that all dialed in. So Mark Hudson at ACRC would be the individual that you could speak with, and I can get his contact information if you're interested. But I'm sure Annie,
Okay.
Annie knows him, so.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Sean.
I'm sorry. Can I just ask, Stephanie, was he on the working group from 2019, the one with that produced the draft report?
I'm not sure, but I have your email, so I can answer that question via email and get you his contact information as well.
Thank you.
I was just going to chime in. The comment was made about organic, and Mike kind of explained that. In my previous role at Kentucky State University, I was the statewide organic ag specialist. And the NOP says that you have to remove your plastic from the field every year when you use it, if you are using that plastic. It does save in labor for cultivation. That's why people like to use it, especially in some of the more specialized horticultural crops. But the rule is you have to take it out. And I think one of the slides touched on biodegradable. You cannot use biodegradable in organic because there are no suitable biodegradable plastics that don't contain prohibited substances. So when they break down, they'll release those prohibited substances in the soil, and then you've got non-compliance issues. So I think it's a super timely conversation to be having. I am somewhat connected up with some folks involved with NOFA, and they are interested in looking at effects of microplastic residues in soil, and also trying to find, truly biodegradable options that would be compliant in organic. So, I don't know if I'm going to get involved in that or not. I'm still developing a research program within Extension, but I might if it makes sense. So, I throw that out there. Super excited to be part of the conversation though.
Thanks, that reminds me, I meant to mention that too. So before I came back to Vermont, I was farming in the Mid-Atlantic, and I actually dropped my certification because this was 10, 15 years ago, because the U.S. organic program was not allowing the biodegradable mulch. They did at the time, I don't know what it is now, but they do in Canada and Europe, I think Japan, just not in the U.S.
Still not. No, they're looking for ways to do it, but it's not allowed yet.
Yeah. Well, we can. There's lots of things to say
and part of the
US
problem
organic
is the
program.
stuff is
But,
biodegradable, but it doesn't really biodegrade very well, So you're just left with smaller and smaller chunks of the stuff that sticks around longer than you like.
I disagree. I actually disagree. So, like I said, I dropped my certification so that I could use BioTello, which was what Bio 360 I think was called at the time. It's made out of corn polymers and stuff, and probably bad stuff, I'm sure. But in our soils, it broke down quite well. In some
That's good to
soils,
hear.
it doesn't. But it is really soil dependent, and I think that's really about microbiology, probably, because when I came back north, we were using it at a farm that wasn't certified, and in some of our prime soils here in Vermont, the light sandy loam doesn't break down very well. So anyways, just to say, but the biodegradable stuff, as you guys look at the feasibility, there's still a lot of issues with it. One being that it's not allowed in the organic certification. It needs to be functional and convenient, like our petroplastic is. And so far, the rules of newspaper don't work. They haven't worked very well. Just to say. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's definitely on our list for AIB to look into biodegradable. We were just, thinking before, and kind of leads into our next agenda item anyway, of just what do the members think? So that's one option, to dive down that research hole of biodegradable alternatives. Also, learn more about recycling. I do have lined up a Canadian called Clean Farms. I think they're nationwide across Canada. And so they are going to talk about their ag plastic recycling program and kind of how it works there. However, they're not able to come. It's Victoria Day in Canada at our next meeting on May 19th. So they're actually going to come in July. So wait with bated breath. They're coming just in a little bit of time. But for May, I would love to hear what members are thinking of, what do you want to know more about? What do we, topics or anything. Go ahead.
Potentially, this is up to the board, but we could invite DEC to look at how other wastes are managed. We have a bottle bill in Vermont, and we have a new extended producer responsibility program associated with hazardous household waste that they're rolling out. So there's many different kind of ways that we have a battery recycling program. We have paint care, so we could bring someone in from DEC to talk about that variety of various programs on how to manage waste. They could also talk about the tire bill that we just talked about if we wanted to. So that's an idea, potentially. But then, Sean, you were mentioning interesting things too. So maybe.
Yeah, I'm glad to have more conversations on it and maybe find ways to get active in some research.
Okay, finish up to discuss. Any other members have ideas or suggestions of what they want to learn more about or hear?
Pam, you just came off mute.
Yeah, sorry, I've been very fascinating what I've learned today. I do want to know more about what's happening to the plastics. And so thanks for introducing that subject. I don't really have anything else to add. I just wanted to prove to you I'm still paying attention.
Thank you, Pam. Okay, I think we'll yeah, we'll go with that. We'll just keep kind of going down this. I did want to mention, I forgot at the beginning of the meeting. So we are still waiting on results from the same 2 questions of our survey that we included in a kind of regional survey. So even outside of Vermont, that the UVM entomology lab was putting out with the same 2 questions to understand what farmers are like most concerned about as far as ag inputs. And so we had only had 5 responses come in January, the last time we met. And so they are actually promoting that survey all the way through this month and maybe into April. So expect to close it sometime in April. So what I was thinking, so we all know that we have to do a survey every year. I'm hoping that maybe this can count for this year's survey. And then if we learn throughout this year of ag plastics, and then 2026 survey could be more specific to get to maybe steer us in making a recommendation or something of how we want to see ag plastic, programs, recycling programs, or ag plastic alternatives, something like that. So maybe then that survey could be more tailored towards that topic for 2026. But we could use, again, the answers we get to these more general questions this year. If you don't want to speak up now, that's fine. But just send me an email if you have something else that we think we should focus surveys on. But as of this morning, that's where my brain was thinking of a logical path. But happy to hear otherwise. Before I open it up for public comment, does any member have anything else to add or observations from today or questions or observations?
Hey, Morgan, Steve.
Yeah.
One thing, and I'm not sure if this is on the agenda or not, but we do have quite a bit of research starting up. Research contracts that we're working on, with Heather Darby and now with Center for Eco Studies. And so at some point, I'm not sure which meeting, we want to give everybody an update on the status of those and where they're going. So they might just want to keep that maybe for the fall.
Yeah, that's a great opportunity. Maybe we can just kind of introduce them at the May meeting as part of our agency update, just kind of say these are starting, and then so maybe check in. All of them have that component that they have to give a
report,
midway.
right.
Yeah.
But we just want to keep the board informed
Yep.
about what's happening.
Yeah. Thanks. That's a good point. Anything else?
Yeah, I just thought of something else too.
Go ahead.
Stephanie and Jill are going to be going over to New York soon to meet with the folks over there about seed. And so I think by the May, could give at the May meeting could give a report about what's happening there or what they've learned.
Perfect. Okay, is there any member of the public who's joined us today that would like to make a comment? Okay, well, I greatly appreciate everyone for coming today and participating. And Mike, thank you very much for introducing your
thanks.
program to us. Super helpful and very nice to meet you.
Nice
So
to meet you all
our
too. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Mike. Our next meeting is May 19th, so it kind of goes off the fourth Monday of the month just because of Memorial Day. So we kicked it up a week, so it's May 19th, but it should be on all of your calendars. I will send out these minutes for review, and then agenda for that meeting will come out about 2 weeks before. So in the meantime, if you think of other things you want to hear or learn about, please give me a call or send me an email. So thank you. Yeah, thank you all.
Thank
Happy
you.
Monday.
All right, bye.